What's the biggest, "oh God, I'm dead" thing you've done at work, but nobody ever found out? Story 1. One day, everybody was working from home except me, so I just left and went to Six Flags with my friend. Being there wouldn't be any spur-of-the-moment video calls. Story 2. I used to work for a big box pet store taking care of the animals that lived in the store. There was a rotation of the animals getting their accessories changed out and cleaned, i.e. water bottles, food bowls, plastic cuts, every day. So each day, the morning person cleaned that day's habitats and the closer did the dishes in the sink and set them to dry and be put back in rotation for use. It was sometimes difficult to complete any of these tasks while also dealing with the customers. The sink we did dishes in was very deep, and company policy stated that the dishes had to soak in a cleaning solution for a certain amount of time. So it took a long time to fill up the sink with a solution to soak everything. It was common to turn the water on to fill up the sink and go see if anyone needed help in the store while you waited. Not long after I started working there, I was performing this task and got pulled into a long conversation with a customer. Normally, I'd duck in the back and turn off the faucet if I thought the conversation would take a while. But this night, I just completely forgot the sink was on. Cue like 20 minutes later walking in the back to ankle-deep water. The sink had overflowed and was filling in the backspace. The door had a rubber stopper at the bottom, keeping it from going into the store. I took a squeegee thing and started herding the water into a drain on the floor on the backside of the fish wall, but it took a long time. I was so frantic and still had to pay attention to customers out on the floor. Luckily, no one else ever went into the back unless you worked in that department, and I was working alone. So I managed to herd most of the water into the fish drain, and the rest dried overnight before the openers came in. No one ever knew I flooded the backspace. A few months later, I realized flooding was a common occurrence, and my manager flooded it at least once a year. Story 3. I auto-archived 2,500 records from our database with one button push. This removed them from active status and canceled any associated reservations and services. I had to click into each record and reinstate it. It took me 6 hours. I admitted my folly at the next team meeting to ensure no one else had to go through the sheer butt-puckering terror I did when those records disappeared. We call it the Doom button now. Why there's a Doom button? I have no idea. Story 4. When I was 18, I worked for MENARDS, like Home Depot. It was a small store with an outside yard that you couldn't drive into, so we would pick what you wanted with a forklift and load the customers out in the parking lot. So this lady came in to pick up a bunch of special order bricks. I loaded 2 pallets of bricks into the back of her very nice new truck. She signed the paperwork, and the transaction was done. Until I sat in the forklift filling out my part of the paperwork, and she backed into a forklift tine and punched it all the way through a tailgate. I was 100% in the wrong, as anyone who has ever driven a forklift knows that unless you're actively using the lift, you keep the tines on the ground if you're parked, and a couple of inches above while driving. I've seen a guy get fired once for driving over a piece of cardboard instead of stopping to pick it up, so I was beyond screwed, but she just put it in drive and took off. She didn't even look back at me. I expected that she was going to pull up to the front of the store to report it, but she just left. As far as I know, she never reported it, and no one ever knew it happened. That was 21 years ago, and I think about that incident pretty often. Story 5. Had a truck turn up 15 minutes before the end of the day, and in my rush and pure anger to just get him unloaded ASAP so I could get home, I drove through the roller shutter doors as they were still opening and caught them with the top of the mast. I got the guy unloaded and on his way, and tried to lock up, hoping to explain it all the way the following day. The door was that bent, it wouldn't lock. As it wouldn't lock, I couldn't set the alarms. I was essentially trapped at work and now an hour late from leaving. In a moment of pure desperation, I lifted the doors again and drove into them from the other side, bending them enough to lock them up, set the alarms, and get home. I'd hit them a little too hard so they were now bent inwards, and the bosses assumed someone had reversed into them during the night. The estate we were on was a notorious cruising spot for the local boy racers, and there were always tire marks or bits of car scattered around the place, so they got the blame. Story 6. Dropped a slab of steel on my toes, a couple of 100 pounds, during my probationary period. But since I was wearing my steel toes, PSA, wear your PPE, and no one else was around, I got away with a slightly bruised foot after I wiggled out. Still got let go, but that's because I was a slow welder. Story 7. Okay, so I'm running a summer camp, and halfway through the day, I'm comparing our bus attendants to the group attendants. And I noticed there's a little girl who was marked as being on the bus, but not in her group. I go and check the group, no sign of her. Other groups, nope. No one has seen the 6-year-old girl, and we're out in nowhere and I'm losing my mind. I have lost a child. We're gonna get so fired and gonna need to call the cops, and they're gonna have to search the woods. My life flashes before my eyes. After 15 minutes of, oh my god, my life is over, my coworker pulled up with the news that she spoke to the girl's mom, and she did not come to camp that day at all. The bus attendance was an error. I was 5 minutes from calling my boss, and instead, I collapsed in the dirt with relief and tried not to cry. Holy hell. Story 8. When I was a brand new airline pilot, we landed at an airport that required a long taxi back to the terminal. During the taxi, the captain made a wrong turn onto a narrow taxiway that led to a small private hangar. As soon as he made the turn, we knew it was the wrong taxiway. But it was very narrow with trees on both sides, so there was no way to turn around. I had no idea how we were going to deal with this. He thought for a minute, then said, "McGonagall, can you see the tower from here?" I looked. Nope. Good. Then they can't see us. With that, he reversed both engines and slowly backed onto the main taxiway. I guess the passengers thought it was normal because no one asked any questions and we never heard anything about it. Story 9. When I was about 17, I used to intern at a bank through a school program. It was a small business bank, so there wasn't any glass as you see at big banks. The setup was 4 desks lined up next to each other with small walls separating the almost cubicle style but shorter. My desk was all the way to the end next to the wall. Anyways, I'm sitting at my desk, bored one day with nothing to do, so I grab a paperclip and start flicking it paper football style at the wall separating my desk and the one next to it. Every time it bounced back, I would flick it again. Well, one time I flicked it a little too hard and the paperclip flew right over the small wall and hit a customer right in the head that was waiting to be attended to. My heart sank, and so did my head down to the desk as I tried to go unnoticed in the hopes that they wouldn't know who did it. Looking back, it was probably obvious that the 16-year-old boy was the one flicking paperclips and not the 40-plus old ladies next to him. Luckily, I don't think the customer knew what hit her, and I was never blamed for it. Story 10. Working at a high-end tour company, I backed a bus hitch into a guest's BMW, broke one of their tail lamps. I picked up all the plastic remnants from the ground and taped a note to their window to find me when they returned from their tour, to discuss the damage and go speak to the owner with me about insurance, etc. I'd been breaking down my trip to make way for the next bus arriving, so I hadn't had a chance to go tell my boss before they returned. The guest came and found me, laughing, said someone had hit it a few weeks prior and it was already being processed through the insurance of the other person who had hit him, and not to worry about it. He hadn't realized that I'd done additional damage because it was the same taillight. Nothing else was damaged and I'd picked up all the broken pieces from the ground, so it didn't look that bad compared to the damage that already existed. I never had to fess up to my boss about the incident and learned to never attempt to park the bus near fancy cars again. Story 11. It was a university. They had this really expensive piece of equipment and I can't remember exactly what it measured or how it worked. What I remember is this. You completed a circuit to power the thing, meaning you plugged a wire into 5 volts or whatever came out of the wall, and another wire into the ground, and plugged both of them into the device. Alligator clips, baby. What you got out of the wall was way too much current, so you had to put a resistor between the wire from the wall and the device. The thing cost something ridiculous, like $25,000 at the time. It was made out of diamonds or gold or something else messed up. Anyways, I got really pissed at my lab partner and just took over the experiment and plugged the thing directly into the wall without a resistor. I basically fried the thing in a second. I smelled burning and could see smoke come out of it immediately. I knew exactly what I'd done. As I literally thought, oh shoot, I'm dead, and started realizing the gravity of my actions, this dude in a huge trench coat thing walks by my lab table, gets his coat caught in it, and pulls the thing off the table. It lands on the ground and smashes into a million pieces, and that dude lost it on him. I just sat in silence. I felt guilty, but like I dodged the biggest bullet of my life. I didn't know definitely that I'd broken it, but I knew definitely that that dude had, and I was too much of a coward to say anything. Story 12. I used to work as a warehouse manager for a company that sells expensive measuring instruments and managed to accidentally drop a box with glass lenses worth $1,100 each. Most of them were broken. The box was freshly in, so I took a huge risk by lying that they came in that way and must have gone damaged during transport. Luckily for me, they did believe me. Story 13. 'Twas the night before I was scheduled to have a tense meeting with my boss and a client. The meeting was supposed to be a sort of peace talk because of tension growing between my staff and the client who was an emotional and difficult person to work with. The night before, my wife and I opened a bottle of wine with dinner and managed to finish it off before bed. This didn't seem like too much at the time, but the next morning I woke up sicker than I've ever been. I still had this difficult meeting, so I got up and got dressed and managed to choke down some Advil and a glass of water. The minute I get on the highway to work, I feel my stomach twisting. There is nothing between where I am now and where my office is except the highway with almost no shoulder. Halfway to work, I feel that feeling in my throat, like a tightening. My bowels are starting to make terrible noises. I realize I'm going to throw up and look around my car for anything to throw up in. I spot a McDonald's bag on the floor, so I grab it. Hoping I don't need to use it, I speed up trying to get to my exit so I can pull over and puke. No dice. I held the bag up to my mouth going 85 miles per hour and threw up red wine into the McDonald's bag, which had the strength of tissue paper because my hot acid puke punched right through the bag and into my lap. By some miracle, I had extra business slacks in my car. I stopped at a gas station and changed in the bathroom. I looked into the mirror and a haggard, sallow man with flopped sweat and sunken eyes stared back at me. Even with a wardrobe change, I smelled faintly of booze and vomit. I went to the meeting and my boss noticed something was up. He rescheduled with a client telling me, "I don't think you're up to it this morning." I for sure thought he was going to fire me for being a huge drunk, but nothing happened. I don't drink wine anymore. Story 14. Spilled soil samples from an ecology project I was helping a doctorate student on. I contemplated just putting them back into the containers and playing dumb, but that would have been a bad thing. So instead, I take her work truck and a soil coring device, and in the middle of the night, I go to each area again and retake the cores. The bad thing is, some sites are on people's front yards. So here I am, coring yards at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday in front of a house like some dirt burglar. One old lady heard me and asked what I was doing in her yard. And thankfully, instead of shooting me or letting my lab director know what the hell I was doing, she simply told me that everyone makes mistakes in science. Take those scientists trying to tell us the Earth is getting too warm. Good luck with your dirt study. You know what, silly old lady? I'll let this one slide. Ignore the fact that we're trying to work out how climate change is interacting with urban ecosystems. You didn't rat on me. Yes, I will enjoy my dirt study. I did not get fired. No one knew what I did except the nice old lady, now the internet. Story 15. I work a desk job at a small office. Bosses left me for a meeting and wouldn't be back for the rest of the day. I didn't have much to do, so I decided to buy a couple of tall cans across the street and watch some Netflix. An hour later, during a quiet part of the show, I heard my boss talking on his phone. Apparently, their meeting got canceled and they'd been back for about 30 minutes. My desk is right outside my boss's office, and somehow he didn't notice anything. He's extremely strict about work and always complains about time wasting, but never said anything to me. I have no idea how I wasn't caught. Story 16. There were some police officers at the reception desk. Not that unusual, police would show up for a wide range of reasons. I strolled by on the way to my office. They were being attended to, so I didn't need to get involved. 20 minutes later, I was strolling past reception again. The police were gone. I popped into the facility manager's office beside the reception desk. We were talking about stuff and I started telling him about this great hashish I had just gotten my hands on. Maybe I could even get him some. CEO sticks his head in the door and says, "Simpleton, can I see you out here?" I stepped out to see what was up and he was standing there beside the same two police officers. Oh, I think. CEO says, "Simpleton, these officers are here to drop off a donation check for a refugee fund. I was just showing them around the building. Can you take some pictures for us for the website?" Story 17. I was a bus driver. I had worked at one place for about 2 years driving. I moved cities and start driving for other places. I drive this route on the first day that I had trained once on in training. In the directions they give you, it says to turn on, let's say, Smith Street. I get to the intersection I was supposed to turn at. I had gone through it in training and thought, I feel like this is the intersection, but there's no sign saying Smith Street anywhere. Not on the traffic light, not on the corner, nothing. Just a sign that says Highway 175. This must not be it. As a side note, I drove back to that intersection in my spare time, and indeed, it does not say Smith Street. It just says Highway 175. You're just supposed to know that it's also Smith Street. Anyway, so on my route, I passed Smith Street. I drive down the wrong way for a while, see no bus stops, and nothing looks familiar. I radio to dispatch. I'm lost. They realize where I am and tell me to take an L here, and an R, and end up back on Smith Street, further than where I was supposed to be. I get back on Smith Street and continue on. I'm now super late. I pick up this guy who immediately gave me a lip and was visibly angry. Something like, "What's the problem? Why are you so late?" I said, "It's my first day at this place, and the intersection back there is no sign saying this is Smith Street." He was like, "Yeah, whatever." Went and sat down. I had a policy driving not to move without making sure everyone was sitting down, for fear someone's face would get shoved into a bar or something. You know, I was considerate. So the guy who was mad, let's call him tie-dyed shirt guy because he was wearing one, says something like, "Why are you making sure everyone is sitting down before moving?" I ignore him. I'm super stressed, it's my first day here, and I'm already getting a lot of bad attitude from this guy, and I just want to concentrate and be safe and get through this. He pulls out his phone and gets up and stands next to me, behind the line, but he leans to get close to me. He's like, "Yeah, customer service, I just want to report this horrible driver. He's the worst driver you guys have. He's a young guy," describes me, "and he was late when he picked me up. Plus, he makes sure everyone is sitting down first before moving. You guys need to fire him." He actually said this, and also I love how he describes how safe I am. I'm like, thanks, in my head. Anyway, so it seemed like forever till I got to his stop. He had gone and sat down in the back of the bus near the back door when it was his stop. I open all doors at the stop as every stop, and he gets up. I see him in my mirror. I think, thank God he's leaving. Probably will use the back door since he's right next to it. He passes the back door and comes to the front. I'm like, damn it. He's gonna walk by me just to give me a little more hell. Looks me right in the face and is pointing at me and is like, "You are the worst driver X has ever had. I can't wait till you're fired, you lowly piece of crap. Screw you. Blah, 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 blah. He's just unloading on me, cussing, etc. I simply said, "Sir, please step off the bus." Repeated it, "Sir, please step off the bus." I never met him at his level. I just stayed calm, stated the same thing, then picked up my radio handset and said, "I'm calling security now." And he stepped off, still pointing and yelling. So this bus being new to me, I hit the switch I think is going to close the back door, not the front, which he's standing partially in. One foot in the sidewalk, one foot in the bus, because he's slowly backing off the bus after my threat of calling security. I accidentally hit the switch to close the front door, not the back as I was intending. It closes on his face. He's like, "Oh, I'm like, this is it. I really am fired now. I've assaulted him by mistake. He's gonna have my hide. He's never gonna let this go." I quickly hit the switch again and opened the door back up and profusely apologized, like, "I am so sorry. I did not mean to do that. I was trying to close the other door." He shrugs his shoulders, did not expect this reaction, and brushes it off like it's no biggie. Once the doors are open again, he continues, "Anyways, you're a piece of crap. Pick me up late, let everyone sit down, screw you," and all that. He did not care about the door shutting in his face. That still gets me. As soon as his other foot was off the bus and I could safely shut the front door, I did so and drove off, with him still yelling and screaming. I still work at the same agency. I did not get fired. Can't believe that happened. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out this next video. The YouTube algorithm really thinks you like it.